Welcome in. It's Thursday night. It's the Audible Live. It's Football Guys. We are here. My name is Jeff Bell. I'm here with my friend Matt Waldman. And we're joined with our good friend Colton Dodson. And so we've gone through here the first half of this Denver and Raiders game, and we're getting a divisional matchup here on Thursday Night Football. It's been a little bit maybe slow moving, as most Broncos games tend to be. It seems like in the first half we saw them obviously start slow against the Giants a couple weeks ago, come back for that big comeback, the big comeback against, apologize Colton, but your Eagles. But then we saw last week that kind of a mess of a game going against the Houston Texans, another team that's very, very good defensively. But how are you guys doing tonight? What are your thoughts so far in this game?
Colton, go for it.
Doing great, man. Like I said, I was saying before we went live, I'm just happy to be here, excited to talk some ball with you guys. And there have been some flashes of Ashton Genty with a little bit of space tonight, and that's been fun to see. You mentioned the Powers Johnson injury and kind of how things have gone away since that. But I have and then the Jack Besh holding call. But it's been cool to see Ashton Genty with a little bit of room.
I was, wondering about Tyler Lockett last week. I kind of had him as a guy you should monitor if you're desperate in a league to just pick up a receiver. And just because, we know his relationship with Geno Smith and Pete Carroll, and he asked for his release. And after watching the Titans for the first 5 to 6 weeks of the season, it was pretty easy to see why. I mean, the fact that, that Brian Callahan and his offense really lacked cohesion, even just fundamental cohesion on what you would want to do with a quarterback to make sure that he has structure. And I think Tyler Lockett was like, look, if you're going to go to the young guys to let them play, get me out of this mess. And they were nice enough to do that. And, he had a red zone target last week against the against the Jaguars. But it was tipped at the line and he was wide open. It probably would have wound up being a touchdown if it could have gotten over the lineman. So, the fact that he's getting on the field with Geno, we'll see what happens, being 3-6 right now. If they can reel off a couple of wins and think they're still have a mathematical shot in the playoffs, maybe they'll keep Lockett, busy, and he can be that one of those secondary or tertiary receivers in the lineup. But if not, Jack Besh is definitely looming as a guy that they'll probably want to see what they got, even though Besh has that special teams role kind of on lock. So maybe that's why they added Lockett right now. But keep an eye out on those targets. I think that's what's going to be as fascinating about this game from a fantasy perspective is if you need a receiver, see how those targets are distributed between him and Besh.
Yeah, it's really been the tight ends too. And that was one of the interesting things about last week of neither of the rookies played. Jack Besh nor Dante Thornton played in last week's game. They really just went with, some of it might have been a showcase of Jacoby Myers. It's a little bit ironic because they played the Titans, and then shortly after they played the Titans is when Tyler Lockett requested his release, and he was a Raider before you knew it. And then now they play the Jaguars, and Jacoby Myers is a Jaguar 2 days after that game. So it's probably just just happenstance that happened that way. But at the same time, maybe some conversations get traded as you're kind of in the hallway or something like that. But I think it's interesting, like you said, like going to the veteran Lockett, we're really seeing the two tight end sets, and that's the biggest thing. That what was it going to be with the two tight end sets, because that was the talk all this summer about how involved Michael Mayer was and how Brock Bowers was coming off the field, and then we hadn't really been able to see it all year because Bowers was injured, and now that's what we're seeing, and that's the way they're building the team right now.
What do you think, just speaking of the Jaguars, and if Colton, if you want to go back to this game, please, by all means, since I just jumped in real quick. But
no, you're good, man. Let's talk about it.
But my buddy Brandon Angelo and I were talking about the Jaguars last night with the Jacoby Myers trade, and he's still very much a believer that Parker Washington's probably going to be the guy that's going to see those inside targets right now and still be a reliable option who could give you some fantasy play down the stretch a little bit. Even if he's not a high-end guy, he's still a guy you can put in your lineup. The thing that he said that I thought was fascinating was he's pretty much out on Trevor Lawrence as a deep ball threat. And he says, his take was, I don't think Trevor Lawrence really throws the deep ball very well. And from what I've seen, I can see that him and Brian Thomas have not been on the same page with fades on a regular basis early in the season. And he said it kind of renders Brian Thomas Jr. kind of a incomplete player at this stage, because his game's built off that vertical. And if you're not going to give him that vertical opportunity or hit on it, then the rest of his game kind of just drags down into the mire, because he hasn't been great in the middle of the field. So Liam Cohen, he thinks maybe Liam Cohen thought he had something in Trevor Lawrence that he doesn't have. And now we're looking at, instead of, I joked that, that Parker Washington was kind of like the misfit that Liam Cohen really didn't envision ever going to, because he was like, I've got Ryan Thomas. He's a thoroughbred who can run. I drafted Travis Hunter. He's quick twitch too, and he can go up and win it, but also like run circles around everybody in the open field. And I'm bringing in Diami Brown, who's a speedster, and everything's speed, speed, speed. And I know that Trevor and the staff keep talking about Parker Washington and how good he looks in the spring, but we can put him on special teams. We don't really need this guy. But now it kind of feels like he's kind of almost kind of begrudgingly needing to go there. But now the addition is with Jacoby Myers. Maybe they're looking now to go, we're going to have to throw short, and so let's get two guys who can go short or go up and get it if we do throw it in the intermediate range, and stop trying to go long. What does that mean? If that's true, and tell me if you disagree with it. I mean, for sure, it's a theory that was positive. If that's true, is Brian Thomas going to stick around Jacksonville during the Liam Cohen era? Will they find another place for him?
That was one of the low-key rumors around the deadline, kind of heading into the deadline, that Brian Thomas's name was sitting out there a little bit, with some teams poking around on who might be available, especially seeing the emergence of Travis Hunter. I think the injury probably to Travis Hunter might have put just a stop to that, and Jaguars looking like they're definitely have playoff aspirations. And I mean, they're in the field right now. If the season were to end right now, and they still do, they're for all the Colts strong start and the talk about the Colts strong start, the Jaguars are only one game behind them, and they still play them twice. So the Jaguars very much have control of their playoff destiny. And so that's some of it, of recognizing that we're in this. We want to keep these players here, obviously, and make the move for Jacoby Myers. I agree with Brandon in the short term that I think that Parker Washington right now, I mean, at some level, it's like almost struggle targets with what's going on in the passing game, of just trying to get it to figure out. And so I think Washington fits well working in the slot there with that. And then I think when you've got Brian Thomas and Travis Hunter healthy, then you're probably shifting Jacoby Myers more into that slot and utilizing him as a slot, having bigger receivers across the field, maybe in the way that Liam Cohen envisioned. But I do think that I've made the analogy that I think Brian Thomas reminds me of like Jaylen Brown with the Celtics, where Jaylen Brown can be the best player in a Celtics playoff series, but he's not Jason Tatum. He's not the guy. And I think that Brian Thomas, with Malik Neighbors at LSU, but then I think in some other stretches, he's just not the number one guy. He's a great number two guy. And we do kind of see some guys of like, I don't know that T. Higgins could possibly be the number one guy, but he's a fantastic number two guy. I mean, George Pickens might be an example of that too, where you've got these guys that maybe they're a little bit limited in what you can overall do with them, or you're trying to keep them in a little bit more scheme specific situations. And you want that number one receiver that you can move them all over the field. And I think that, and it's also probably a mentality level too. And I think Travis Hunter has a little bit more of that mentality of being the number one receiver. And I think Brian Thomas Jr. is a little bit more, I don't know if passive is exactly the right word, but I do know that Brian Kelly was very frustrated with the mental side of Brian Thomas Jr.'s game before he broke out finally. But I mean, Brian Thomas Jr., elite athlete. He was recruited to play basketball at LSU and Texas A&M. So this isn't like a Division III basketball type thing. Like he could SEC basketball. It tells you how the upside, the athleticism that Thomas possesses.
Yeah, man. And I feel like we were talking about Trevor Lawrence a little bit, and I feel like every time I watch Trevor Lawrence play, it's the accuracy is the most frustrating part. Like you guys kind of mentioned it, but there are opportunities there. And you talked about Liam Cohen recognizing that, like, hey, maybe we don't have what we thought we had in Trevor Lawrence. And I know a lot of the conversation around Trevor Lawrence entering this season was like, if it doesn't happen with Liam Cohen, like, is it really going to happen? And then we see how aggressive James Gladstone has been since taking over, and it's like, what does the future hold for Trevor Lawrence, right? Like, is that a conversation we're going to have at any point in terms of, like, I mean, we're kind of in this era, we're maybe seeing it play out with Kyler Murray too, where it's like, with these quarterback cap hits and these contracts, teams are a little more willing to, like, move on if it's not a fit. But at the same time, you have a team with playoff aspirations. It's just such a weird middle ground where they're making it work. The defense has regressed a little bit too in recent weeks, but they're making it work. They're in the hunt. I mean, Jeff mentioned they're in the field, but it's just such an interesting um, angle to this whole Jaguar situation. Is like, what does the future look like for Trevor Lawrence?
Well, if we're still in the AFC South and we're talking about they're in the hunt, we might as well talk about Daniel Jones and the Colts a little bit because, you know, I'm just looking around Twitter. I know Monday I came out with my top 10 piece and said, I think the Steelers found the blueprint for how to stop this Colts offense. It's just a matter of whether there are teams that have the personnel and the discipline to follow it. Because Pittsburgh, if you watch them against Cleveland the first time, they basically shut down Quinshawn Judkins by just playing gap sound defense. And then they said, look, we know the only way you can throw the ball is early down play action off of the run. And once we shut down your run, we're not really worried about, we're not going to honor the play action. And we're going to meet you in the backfield at the top of your drop, and harass you. And that's what they pretty much did by the middle of the first quarter, and the game was over. Now, they did the same thing against the Colts. And the Colts, league leading on first down play action success, because their run game's so good. Daniel Jones tops in the league on the number of first read passes completed, or the number of first read passes thrown. I think that's what it was, which, the detractors I heard, and I'm probably one of them a little bit, was, look, he can throw the ball. We know he can throw the ball. He's a great thrower. If you give him time, he's going to thread any pass that you want him to throw, but make it confusing. Make him have to think about and process information, put pressure on him, put him behind the sticks, where it's like, it's not 1st and 10 or 2nd and 3 or 3rd and 1, but it's 2nd and 8, 3rd and 13, those types of situations, and you can pressure them, and play action doesn't matter. And suddenly you've got a different player. And I think we saw that with Daniel Jones against the Steelers, because they met him at the top of his drops. 4 deflected passes, 3 interceptions, 2 strip sacks, and 1 big loss, in a pear tree, I guess. But but the whole thing is you have all of that, and then Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren, even JJ Watt was saying in the opening thing, which made me laugh so hard, because it's the thing I've been most frustrated with, guys, is like, I like Tyler Warren, but like, I'm kind of, as a defense, as someone watching defense, I'm frustrated watching so many defenses be so undisciplined and not like go towards the receiver they should be covering in that zone, because they see eye candy go across that's being covered by somebody else, and they're giving this guy like 20 yards of space to run. They were doing the same thing with Tucker Kraft in Green Bay. And so much yardage was coming from that. I'm just like, these are easy plays that need to be shut down. Why is nobody doing this? And Pittsburgh just made sure that they made that dude taste turf feel a hit before he could even turn up field on a regular basis. And that ruined their first down gimme passing game that was fielding a lot of yardage. So I guess my thought is, Atlanta's a pretty athletic defense. The Chiefs have some guys who can flow to the ball a bit, and they've got a good coordinator. these two teams are up next in the next, 3 games. Atlanta's up next. Do you think that they can stop Daniel Jones in similar fashion? Do you think that this is a blueprint that these two teams can follow? And if they do, and they can, does that give room for some of the lesser teams that they face to say, yeah, I think we can do that too? Or do you think it's still, it's still a Daniel Jones comeback season for fantasy, and you might as well ride him for all it's worth?
Colton,
Yeah, Jeff, you can go for it.
All right.
We did that at the same time. Yeah, you take it.
I don't know. I was kind of chuckled a little bit because we saw these power polls that had the Colts number 1 just because they had the best record. And I think that in a neutral playoff situation, you bring Patrick Mahomes into that game against the Colts, or you bring the Bills, or you bring a healthy Lamar Jackson against the Colts here, and nobody's taking the Colts as like the number 1 team in the power. At some level, it felt like we were doing like the college football thing of like, well, Indiana's undefeated and they're the only undefeated team, so they're number 1, and like that doesn't work in the NFL. We don't do that with power polls. But I think that you're exactly right, but it goes back to that of like, sure, if you can just stop Jonathan Taylor and force them to be uncomfortable, then yeah, they're very beatable. And it's one of, it's easier said than done at some level. It's some of these elite guys, and especially get them in these elite seasons that they can. I think every team going into the Colts game is intending to stop Jonathan Taylor. I think the Steelers probably they were embarrassed against the Packers on Sunday Night Football in the second half there. And I think that they had some difficult conversations probably in the locker room leading into that game. And I think the Colts probably were in a position a little bit where they're almost playing with house money because things are going so well that it's just unexpected that you're trying to keep it rolling at this point. And we saw them get aggressive, go out and get Sauce Gardner, and that patches over a massive hole that they had in their secondary. Their second corner might have been the worst second corner in the league. So being able to plug Sauce Gardner in there, and that gives them another way to potentially win games now with having stronger defense. And so maybe they keep going. But again, I think you go back to there's such a gauntlet in the AFC to make it to the Super Bowl out of the AFC of potentially having to beat Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes 3 games in a row. And that's like Joe Burrow's not even involved in that conversation. And you might get Justin Herbert, catch a good day with him. And I mean, it's, to say that Daniel Jones is going to do that, I just think I'm not there yet, but I think at the same time, it's been a good system for Daniel Jones. Obviously, we've seen the production there, and we've seen Daniel Jones be a fantasy relevant at minimum, but a competent NFL quarterback in the past. It's just been the injuries, the supporting cast, the bad offensive line, all those different things have held him back from consistently being able to do that.
What advice do you guys give? That's the other thing I want to know is, what do you guys give to folks who have Daniel Jones? Is it don't quit the guy you drafted ahead of him? Or if you did already and you said, you decided you were burning the boats, do you need to go to the forest and start building the ship and like look around for a substitute somehow?
Yeah, I think it's all circumstantial, right? Like you mentioned, there's a very real possibility where somebody ended up with Daniel Jones as like their 13th, 14th round flyer, and it's like, first world problems. You're chilling right now, unless you, like you said, you burned the ships and you went all in on Daniel Jones, and then that might be a slightly more precarious situation. Like you mentioned the Falcons and Kansas City, and I think you hit the nail on the head that like maybe there is a blueprint now in terms of putting the Colts in those situations they don't want to be in, getting them off schedule, getting them in a position where they can't play off of that early down play action that has worked so well. It is definitely like a defensive personnel issue too. Is every defense going to be as athletic as Kansas City, as Atlanta, in terms of their ability to limit yards after catch and keep, limit the space they're giving to Tyler Warren and Michael Pittman and some of these awesome yards after the catch targets that Daniel Jones has, right? So there could be spots, but we definitely did see the floor with Pittsburgh, and it's not like they were entering this game and Pittsburgh was, on the same level as the Texans of the world, right? Like this was a defense that entering this game, I think Jeff mentioned they were maybe a little upset. They wanted to get right a little bit, and maybe gave other teams a blueprint for doing this. So I think instead of like a set and forget, Daniel Jones is my guy, it's a situation that you do have to monitor a little more. And especially if you're in like one quarterback leagues or whatever it may be, there's probably other options in terms of dart throws and things like that. But I do think being proactive in terms of like, okay, I do need to monitor this a little bit, maybe play the matchups a little more with Daniel Jones than maybe I thought I had to when I burned the ships and traded the guy I drafted before him. I think that might be a situation that we're moving toward versus the like setting the world on fire version of Daniel Jones we saw for the first 8 or 9 weeks or 7 weeks, I guess now.
How many games do you give Tyler Warren before you go, okay, maybe the wall's coming? Because like if the game plan is like, yeah, just get a hat on him within the first 2 yards, and let's make him a priority. Let somebody else catch the ball. We don't care. Just don't let him alone in the flat anymore. Because even when JJ Watt, I just laughed so hard when JJ Watt, the first question he asked him was, so what does it feel like to catch a football and not have anybody within 20 yards of you? I was literally listening to that and I literally jumped out of my chair and like, sorry, Joe, finally somebody just like, asked him the question, because it's not that he's a fraud or anything. It's just that he's getting it easy and they're scheming him up. Well, kudos to them. But like somebody stop that. And I'm glad a former defender was like, yeah, this is just silly that this is happening to you, and the response almost seemed kind of defensive, which was kind of funny too. It was like, well, they're scheming me well, and that, but
yeah. Well, I think it's probably he's an intelligent player, intelligent person. Like, don't talk about me, guys. Like, let's talk about Jonathan Taylor. Ignore me. Still continue ignoring
Jedi
me.
mind trick. You don't exist.
Yeah.
I don't exist.
Yeah, exactly. But at some levels, it's what are your pivots? Because if you've just lost Tucker Kraft, then if you were looking at where Tyler Warren went in redraft leagues, and you probably didn't have a Brock Bowers or a Trey McBride when you took Tyler Warren. You probably drafted him in hopes that he would be the upside of being the tight end one there. Maybe you have like a Kyle Pitts along with him, something like that, kind of a player that would have been in a similar range. Or our friend Andrew Cooper talks about the yin yang theory of tight end. You just kind of grab an upside guy and kind of grab a consistent guy. So maybe you've got like a Zach Ertz or something like that with your Tyler Warren. It's I hear you on like lower production, but if you've been enjoying Tyler Warren, you probably haven't been grabbing like the Rondé Gadsden, because you've been feeling pretty good about the tight end. So I know, like for me, if I'm in leagues and I have a massive hole at tight end, I'm grabbing every single thing that kind of pops up that might turn into something. But if I'm feeling like I'm good here with Warren, and maybe I've got a backup too that I also like, I'm probably not really being aggressive on grabbing some of these other guys. So we're in the home stretch, and I really can't believe it. Of like, in my mind, I keep kind of saying of like, it's only week 10, but also it's already week 10 of like I just feel like we're like right before Thanksgiving is kind of when you're in the content game is kind of the grind of the content season. They're kind of pushing towards Thanksgiving and that holiday break and the fantasy playoffs. So it's yes, of like having maybe a potential pivot, but what's available, I guess, is some of it. And I think that maybe in your redraft league, if you wanted to get spicy and try to trade Tyler Warren for like Sam Laporta or something like that, because Laporta, he started out really slow, but he's come on pretty strong the last month or so, or you probably missed the window. There probably was a window where you could have traded him for Brock Bowers straight up potentially. That I think window is gone after the explosion against the Jaguars last week. But I think it's what would be the available pass that you could take.
Yeah, and I think also when you kind of look at the options in Indianapolis right now, like at the very least, I think we're still seeing roughly a 20% share of the targets for Tyler Warren too. And if you're looking at options. Like Jeff said, if you're sitting pretty with Tyler Warren, maybe you weren't prioritizing, a Rondé Gadsden or something like that. And now you're kind of like, oh, I wish maybe I did. But in any case, at this position too, with how low the floor can be at tight end, if you've got an option like Tyler Warren, who, yeah, maybe he has less space to operate with and things like that as defenses start to adjust how they play him and things like that. The volume that you might see from him though on that target share, maybe 4 or 5 catches a game, maybe it's only like 45, 50 yards, whatever it is. And you're looking at it and you're like, okay, it's not the absurd totals that Tyler Warren used to give me, especially if he doesn't get into the end zone. But I think with that floor that you're seeing, because of the role that he plays in this offense right now, even though he's coming back to earth a little bit, I still think you could do a lot worse. And especially at that position. And then Jeff mentioned like maybe some of the sell windows are closed for alternatives. And now it's kind of like, okay, we're rolling with Tyler Warren. Let's see how this goes.
Yeah, I could see how you'd have to do like combo trades to probably get rid of Warren to get another tight end, because anybody who sees you getting rid of Warren going, that seems fishy. What do I not know? That's how someone will feel. But the other option is not much is available on the waiver wire, but if there were 3 players that I would probably consider who are probably on waiver wires, one would be Pat Freiermuth, who I touted a lot this summer and it just didn't work out. But you're seeing, while Darnell Washington being a thing, it still seems like when Aaron Rodgers needs to throw something back shoulder, tight window, and find somebody who actually is reading the coverage and it's not schemed up, and it's like Freiermuth's the guy. It's almost like, I almost feel, I mean, it's probably me projecting this than it's actually the truth, but I want to imagine Arthur Smith basically saying, no, I want my Jonnu Smith and my Darnell Washington in here. And Aaron Rodgers saying, yeah, I like Darnell Washington, but you traded for this guy that, yeah, he's good, but Pat's better. Like, Pat's better for what I need. He can read the field and do more things for me as a receiver. And I think it's bearing out a little bit more slowly but surely. So he's a cheap option you could consider. Luke Musgrave, if he didn't get picked up on waivers by the Tucker Kraft guy, because they had a better option, maybe a second option that's working out. Maybe they got Gadsden. Maybe they got somebody else and it's working fine. I mean, Musgrave was the number 1 tight end coming into this whole thing when they were both drafted at the same time. He was the favorite option. He's not as rugged, but why are they going to change what they do with Musgrave? If you're going to put any tight end in open space with 15, 20 yards to run, I don't care whether you can or can't run over somebody after you've already gained 10 to 15 yards. He'll probably make a miss. He's a little bit better at that than Kraft is, and he's pretty good with the ball in there. So he could be cheap. Greg Dulcich, I mean, until Darren Waller's back, and so why not? Dulcich had a pretty good game. That this is the same offense that made Jonnu Smith a thing, in fantasy, and Darren Waller ended up doing pretty well when he was healthy enough, and maybe somebody dropped Darren Waller, so you could probably get Dulcich and then kind of swing from Dulcich to Waller as Waller starts to get back there. I mean, those are options that I would probably think about if I was feeling desperate.
I think that the Kraft conversation or the Musgrave conversation is interesting. I think John Fitzpatrick is being, I don't think he's a great player by any means, but I think the Packers like him quite a bit, and I think he is a lot better blocker than Luke Musgrave. And a lot of the value that Tucker Kraft was created was like the tight end screens that he was able to use and kind of give a chuck block and then release on that. And I don't see that as Musgrave's game very much. I think Musgrave is a little bit more of a vertical seam type tight end, and he just popped up. I saw him pop up on the injury list right before I went on, but Savion Williams feels like to me a player that could kind of come into some of those things that Tucker Kraft was doing in the screen game of like, let's get the ball in Savion Williams' hands and allow him to create. We saw 2 weeks ago against the Steelers, he did have that touchdown on Sunday Night Football, was running an orbit motion play, and they hit him on the wheel route there with the touchdown there. That's my hesitation on where Kraft's value has come from in terms of putting Musgrave right into there, because I do think that Fitzpatrick is going to play a lot of snaps and be out there. That'll be frustrating, but he's not going to be a focal point of the offense. But I think that lack of creativity in the tight end screen game that Musgrave hasn't really flashed. Musgrave had a really strong summer. He was really coming on, and the expectation was that they would be utilizing more 2 tight end sets because Musgrave had such a good summer. But then it just kind of didn't really ever materialize. It was Kraft was the main guy and then they were rotating, trying to figure out some of the receivers.
Yeah, and I was going to ask too, is that something you think continues in terms? I can't imagine that Matt LaFleur would change too much. Losing Tucker Kraft is big, but are we going to continue to see a lot of those 2 tight end sets in Green Bay with Luke Musgrave and John Fitzpatrick as well?
I mean, I could see how they would keep that with those guys. If Fitzpatrick being the good blocker that he is, that they could go roll with that, and that makes sense. And I could also see how that they might try and figure out ways to. They've been talking all summer about how they want to get Savion Williams the ball in space, and we've seen indications of what he can be as a runner. I still contend that if he doesn't make it as a receiver, he'll be the starting running back for the Green Bay Packers by 2028. But there's a lot of time between now and then. He's a very talented ball carrier for a guy with limited experience. But yeah, I mean, I could see how they want to keep the system intact. And if it really isn't working, then they'll switch up. If they start losing games and it's not working, then I think LaFleur makes tweaks. But otherwise, he's probably got enough things on his plate.
Yeah, we need that running back eligibility on Sleeper for Savion Williams then.
Right.
Cordero Patterson 2.0 here.
Yeah,
right.
There we go.
Wanted to talk to Rashid Shaheed, the trade to Seattle and reconnecting with Clint Kubiak. I think it's interesting because the timing of some of these things Cooper Kupp missed the game this week, and Cody White was the wide receiver 3, played 71% of the snaps. At some level, I feel like they're like, we feel like we're a pretty good team. We're going to be in this. And Cody White is our wide receiver 3. If Cooper Kupp or if somebody else is out of the lineup, maybe we need to evaluate some options here. And Shaheed presented a solution that Kubiak is very comfortable with. To me, he's probably going to be as valuable as he was in fantasy in the Saints, especially the last couple of weeks. I really think they've been showcasing him because his volume just jumped up a lot out of nowhere almost. But I think that we saw with Kubiak's offense last year, Shaheed's ability to win downfield. That's kind of what Torrey Horton's been doing for the Seahawks. There's a little bit of overlap there. I think Shaheed's more rounded player at this point in his career. Has the ability to attack in the quick game, get the ball in his hands. I think that they didn't have another receiver outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba that can do those types of things. So that was probably part of the addition on that. But how do you see that shaking out? Do you see one, I'm leery that there's enough volume for anybody except for Jackson Smith and Jigba in this passing game. But I mean, this kind of feels like it puts a kibosh on Torrey Horton as a potential breakout, and it probably diminishes Rashid Shaheed's value as well.
Yeah, Matt, what do you think on that one? I actually wanted to know in terms of because there was a lot of cold water being poured on the Torrey Horton buzz this week. It was like the least optimal trade timing of all time, right after the breakout Sunday night game, and then here comes Rashid Shaheed. So yeah, is that a situation where and what happens with Cooper Kupp and what happens with this receiver room in general outside of JSN?
I think the nice thing about everybody's right about the fact that congratulations, you got Torrey Horton on waivers. Now you can drop him. There's probably some truth to that. Because if Cooper Kupp returns healthy enough, are you really going to bench Kupp even though he hasn't been fantasy productive, but he understands coverages so well? And there's so much that you can do to adjust with him and move him around, and the versatility that he offers for a young guy who might develop into that, but isn't quite there. And you're kind of using more in a, not in a one-dimensional way, but probably only in one role, and maybe certain looks outside of that role. And then you're bringing in a guy, like as Jeff said, who knows this offense. I mean, he knows this offense very well. So it seems to me, yeah, you're right. Shaheed and Horton will probably split time, and neither of them are going to be that valuable right away. And you're just going to have to, maybe you're playing in the playoffs and you go, you know what the heck? Let me go ahead and add Shaheed, or let me add Horton, because one of them gets hurt or is suffering some sort of ding, or we're seeing enough clues of target volume or snap share that we can go, all right, we can predict who this is going to be and take a shot on it. So there's that. That's probably the best case scenario, or the worst case scenario, excuse me. The best case scenario is that, is that they look at this and say, you know what, we can move Shaheed around and let him play multiple roles in this offense. And so if we don't like what we're seeing from Kupp, maybe we can put Shaheed in some of these roles, or put Shaheed in roles that allow Kupp to do a little bit more. I don't know what that would be. I'd have to look at what Seattle's offense was doing to but I'm just guessing. Or maybe they decide that we could put Horton in some of Kupp's roles and Shaheed on the outside, or we can put Shaheed outside and put Jackson Smith and Jigba in some of Kupp's roles, more on the inside a little more often. And now we're really cooking, because all this does is amp up Jackson Smith and Jigba to be the Michael Thomas Jr. of the Pacific Northwest, and become even more of a monster target hog. So, I mean, I think that that's probably the things I would guess.
Yeah, and I mean that versatility too that you're giving to an offense that's already been one of the most efficient passing offenses in the NFL to this point is a pretty scary proposition, I guess. But man, Sam Darnold too. I just every week I watch him play, I'm so impressed by, I feel like I've mentioned it a few times, but I feel like all offseason are a lot of the talking points with Sam Darnold was let's use Sam Darnold as an example for how good JJ McCarthy can be. Because if Kevin O'Connell can do that with Sam Darnold, think of what he can do with JJ McCarthy. And it's like, wait, no, Sam Darnold's actually really good. I think I traded him to Jeff in one of our dynasty leagues, and I regret it. Yeah, Jeff remembers, and I regret that, man. He looks awesome, and it's just like the accuracy and the touch that you see when it feels like every time the ball leaves his hands, it's like this is going to be a perfectly placed ball. So I'm just really impressed by him, and now that he has that option and the versatility, I think his value's up. Sam Darnold for me.
Yeah, he's such an aggressive downfield thrower, and it's always been. He's always been that guy that throws roundhouses as a passer, like, and he can do it off the ropes where you're like blitzing him, and when he's comfortable and on the move, he really throws the ball well in that facet. The big issue with him was always, can they disguise things and fool him in coverage? And what they put pressure and disguise things, he's often thrown it to the wrong guy, and he's done that since USC in New York. But what really made me go, uh-oh, maybe he really has started to like turn things around, is when I started looking at blitzes and pressures versus quarterbacks, and like what their completion percentage is and yards per attempt were. And Sam Darnold was as good as anybody, if not better, especially against pressure, when it's not blitz, but your base, protection breaks down against the base defense, which is where your completion percentage and your quarterback performance is lowest. And his was the highest of a lot of the top guys I looked at, like including Allen and the elite quarterbacks. And I just was like, okay, so is this a product of the offensive line and how good their line was, and having like Addison and Jefferson and Hawkinson? Or is this really Sam Darnold? And the early returns, when we started looking at pressures against him in Seattle, same thing. And you're like, okay, it's clicked for him. That's what's gone on. So, yeah, I mean, congratulations to anybody who took a flyer on Sam Darnold and said, you know what, I can't quit you yet. Let's see what happens. And it's been fantastic. So, thrilled for him and thrilled for Seahawks fans.
Or
He's-
anybody who traded for him from me, which would be Jeff Bell. So
I think it was it was the champion last year, and I might have won the league the year before. A pretty solid team. I was really lacking my quarterback 3, and I saw Colton was doing a little bit of a rebuild, and ended up getting Travis Etienne and Sam Darnold for 2 seconds from Colton. So I like that.
You gave me Michael Wilson and Kyle Williams too. All right.
Okay.
Hey, listen, I like
Yeah.
Michael.
Gave you Michael
I
Wilson
like where
and Kyle.
Kyle can go. Listen, look, I traded Stephon Diggs and Tank Bigsby for Keyshawn Butte in a second in a league that I'm going to be rebuilding in. So I think the guy did cut Tank, but now probably added him back. And I'm after Keyshawn just keeps teasing me right now. So that's the issue. But I laugh because it's like, I think there was I traded in another league this week on a team that I've been struggling because my wide receivers are Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and a couple other people that were hurt. I traded for Butte. I traded Travis Etienne for Butte because I have monster running backs. I've got 5 other running backs I can start ahead of Travis Etienne, and including Kyle, and then Kyle Monangai on top of that. So it was like, but I could only start 5. So it's like in this league, and I could probably start 6 and be like much better. But I had Butte and I think Calvin Austin, and that was it, that I could start. And Butte gets hurt and pulls a hamstring after I trade for him. So it's like, I feel your pain. It's funny how those trades go.
Yeah, man.
Sam Darnold is second in QBR behind Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson 78.9, Sam Darnold 77.9, and he is, I think he's third in passer rating. Lamar's got 136.7. Lamar's efficiency numbers are crazy because he really has only played like that Buffalo game and the Miami game is about all he's played so far. But Drake May is second in passer rating, and Sam Darnold is third. I did a blind resume this week in the roundup, my Monday roundup on quarterbacks of who would be your MVP candidate. And I just put kind of the efficiency numbers out there, the raw numbers out there, the team record out there, and stacked it up. And Sam Darnold is interesting as a low key, under the radar MVP candidate.
Oh, good for him.
I believe it, man. He's been unreal. That I feel like when I watch Seattle too, and this has been the issue for a lot of fantasy managers is this running back split and the Zach Charbonnet, Ken Walker stuff. And it just seems like the offensive line, it kind of feels like when I watch the Raiders, like, we're seeing a little bit more space for Genty lately, and we'll see. But when one of these running backs, whether it's Ken Walker or Zach Charbonnet, touches the ball, it feels like they're being contacted almost immediately. Is that like the Achilles heel for this? And maybe Achilles heel is hyperbolic, but like the vulnerability for this Seattle offense, is it their ability to run block and create some space for these running backs? Is that going to hurt them at any point?
Well, I mean, cohesion is probably an important part, and this is a team that they finally, the GM said, maybe I should stop doing the discount draft and offensive lineman thing and actually start drafting some of these guys in the first round. So youth, the free agency, getting everybody kind of cohesive is probably going to take a year for all of that to click. And people, I think we talked about it last week. Sometimes it takes longer for the running game to actually click than the passing game. And I think maybe that's part of the issue there. And then part of the issue, if you ask me, is teams that use committee backs. You've got 2 backs who are really good and were used to being the man in college. And those guys, and when you are a running back who gets 18 to 25 touches, you start playing games with defenders. Like I still remember way back in the day, late career LaDainian Tomlinson running behind guys like sorry to bring it up, but like, our departed Nick Mangold, or guys who were like really great, great, linemen, and even in New York, and seeing him play games with Ray Lewis, like literally, like just go, okay, Lewis shot this gap this time. I'm going to fake to this gap and go back here and rip off a 15, 20, 30-yard run because he was playing mind games with the linebackers and knowing what their tendencies are. And I think that you don't get enough of that if you're only getting like 2 touches in the first quarter, 3 touches at the end of the second quarter, and then 4 touches in the fourth quarter. They don't, there's too much going on. That's why Rico Dowdle's doing well in addition to everything else that he has, is that he can play games with defenders a little bit. The top running backs get to do that. And I think that guys who just scheme offenses, sometimes they forget that the running back's playing mind games with people, and that you got to have some of that. So I think that both of these backs are good. You got to free both of them. So one of them needs to go somewhere else. The other one needs to be the starter, and then and try and develop a secondary guy, or just sit the guy. Say, I'm sorry, when your contract's up, you'll get to go somewhere else. People seen enough tape. You're going to get that opportunity, but we need to give this guy touches. We need to do that. You're not happy about it. Look, you're getting paid. You're a professional. Be a professional. And then when they demand a trade, then you do what you need to do.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I'm glad you went there, because you look at Charbonnet and he's the type that he's going to make defenders make business decisions in the second half of games, because he's that kind of running back. And then Walker is the type that he's, lose a yard here, lose a yard there, but you give him the wrong seam that one time, he's gone. And there are very few running backs in the league that have that ability. And so, like, for him, by having him in this committee, he's probably at some level trying to hit the home run too often, instead of just take what's here, or like kind of do that. He's trying to hit the home run all the time because he's getting his shot. And then Charbonnet doesn't have the opportunity to just wear on the defenders to be able to get into his rhythm, but also to make them say, I'm tired of this dude hitting me. And I think that really hurts. And I think it's a good, I'm glad you went there as well on talking about one of them being gone, because I would have to believe it's going to be Walker, since his contract ends after this year. And I think it's an interesting thing just in general, because we saw the talk about Breece Hall potentially getting traded at the trade deadline. His contract is ending. Ken Walker's contract is ending. There's a plug-in right there for Charbonnet. There's probably Braylon Allen, if they're rebuilding with the Jets, and Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, they're probably fine with them as the running backs. So there's going to be some really interesting shifting with free agent running backs.
Chicago's going to be very happy.
Yes.
They're going to have one of those 2 backs, probably.
Kansas City's probably going to have the other one. And it's...
Yeah. I mean, and if they don't get that, as my buddy Brandon, who's a Bears fan, he's with me. He likes Sean Tucker. He's like, get Sean Tucker out of Tampa. If you want a cheap option, let that guy go, and you can pair him with Manon guy and get your discount Gibbs and Montgomery in tandem for Ben Johnson.
I've done enough. I'm doing the every other week, and I'm trading off with Mike Cash, our good buddy, on the big board. And Jeremiah Love is just, there's a lot of Jahmyr Gibbs there, I feel like, in Ben Johnson's mind, potentially Jeremiah Love in this draft. And a semi-local guy there at Notre Dame, I feel like the Bears probably wouldn't have too much problem selling Jeremiah Love jerseys should they draft him to be their Jahmyr Gibbs. But I think that's just an interesting way to go. Is there anything else, Adonai Mitchell, or anything else with the trade deadline, or anything else with this point of the season, where your terms of trying to build your roster to look down the stretch of your leagues, anything else that is on your guys' minds?
I threw out a couple darts on Adonai Mitchell just because of how, I guess, shallow this wide receiver room is. Obviously, like, that's been one of the bigger storylines of the Jets this season, I guess, among a lot of other things. But the lack of options at the in the receiver room. And it's like when they made that deal for Sauce, all of the reporting was that the Jets asked for Adonai Mitchell to be included in that deal. They wanted to bring him in, and that seems like a situation where he's at least going to get an opportunity. Who knows how productive it's going to be, right? Like there's a lot that needs to happen with this Jets passing offense, but that is a guy on my dynasty rosters where if he was out and about, I tried to land him and just gonna kind of wait and see. He's a younger guy. See what happens here in a situation where they wanted him there. There's clearly a path if he produces. So I think he could be interesting in this situation, even if it's not an overly efficient or potent offense. I don't think anybody would describe the Jets as that. So
I'm just buckling in for more Mason Taylor in that offense. And I mean, listen, we both have a connection to Justin Fields, you being an Ohio State fan and me being a Georgia alum and him growing up here. But I don't know. I still feel like the Jets is where players go to die, their careers to die. Yeah, and I feel like there's some of that going on there, because he had a prime opportunity, and Alec Pierce just got better and better. I think that's one thing that maybe we should talk about too, is that he might actually, from a route running standpoint, might be a more complete route runner than Michael Pittman, and that allows Michael Pittman to eventually become the strong number 2 that he really is as a player. Tough dude, can catch, all of that. But Alec Pierce, the way Daniel Jones was throwing to me, especially against Pittsburgh, and the routes that they threw with him, and then what he can do in the deep game, he might be their future number 1. I mean, it's interesting how that's gone. And sometimes it takes a couple years. I remember when he came on and the veteran cornerbacks were like, this guy's going to be good. It's just going to take a little bit of time. And I remember the future corners were saying that, and wide receivers were saying that about Khalil Shakir in year 1. Now Shakir's not a number 1, but in Buffalo's offense, I like to poke fun that it is they decided they don't want a number 1 receiver. They just want Josh Allen to spread the wealth however they're going to spread it, and they can deal with it.
I might have my fandom glasses on, but I absolutely believe that Shakir, Amon-Ra St. Brown probably can't get to Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I think that he could be like Jarvis Landry. Like he can be the type of guy that's
I agree.
12 to 15 targets per game, and Joe Brady, just for whatever reason, I don't know what's going on. But I think that Pierce that was my biggest takeaway, the Alec Pierce of it all, because Alec Pierce, another guy, like we talked about these running backs, Alec Pierce was heading for free agency, and now you move Adonai Mitchell out of there, then Alec Pierce would have shocked some people with what he would have gotten on the open market. But young wide receivers don't hit the open market in free agency. Teams lock them up. Teams make sure that they don't get out there. And if they do, it's usually via trade. It's like George Pickens is a guy that we saw get traded. The Steelers said, we're not going to let you walk without getting something for you. But I think that Mitchell moving on is really commitment to Pierce. And when you look at holistically, having Jonathan Taylor, having Tyler Warren, Pierce is the perfect complement to those two players, of his ability to win downfield, and those two players opening the ability to have Pierce win downfield. Whereas I think Downs and Pittman kind of fall more naturally into supporting roles, and those probably are arguably the type of guys that when it comes time to make a financial commitment, I know they've already given Michael Pittman Jr. his second contract, but that might be where the money comes from to pay Alec Pierce, and knowing that down the road you're going to have to pay Tyler Warren and kind of those types of things. But I think I'm glad you went there. I think that's a really good, insightful point. That's all I've got tonight, guys. We haven't seen too much here going on in this Broncos-Raiders game. I think the Broncos did get a field goal to pull up 10-7 right now. We've got a touchdown from Troy Franklin. He had an early touchdown from Ashton Genty. So Ashton Jetsy's getting you there probably in fantasy. And I mean, Troy Franklin was leading the Broncos in targets this year. And I don't know that anybody would have seen that coming, but that's where it is coming into this game. And he's been more involved than Cortland Sutton in this game too. And the natural connection with Bo Nix, some of that there, but that's a young ascending player that kind of stepping into being the nominal wide receiver 2, maybe the wide receiver 1 in some level for the Broncos. That's about what we're seeing. We're seeing Brock Bowers kind of get out there a little bit, but we're not getting definitely not the volume. Neither of these offenses getting much going. And some of that is the Broncos.
You know what we need in this game? We need Las Vegas to get back to their Oakland roots. There needs to be a fight. There needs to be a fight in this game. Well, that's what I'm look, I'm just the old school guy in this room. So like that's what I'm used to seeing is like the Raiders start fights with other AFC West teams. So that's what I want to see is a fight.
Well, I was going to say we need an infield at the 40-yard line. So
yeah, we do. I do miss the infield. I miss the infield of the Raiders game.
I miss Al Davis, to be honest. Seeing this guy who was like probably like slick as all get out when he was a head coach, like seeing the videos of him, and he was probably with the fashion and the times, and then you just see what age does to you. Like I'm looking forward to being like Al Davis in another 30 years and see what crazy space outfits that I would wear and trying to look young. That'll be fun.
All right, we're going to let everybody get out of here. Enjoy the second half of this game here. This game I feel like is never ending. We usually start at 9:15 and we start at 9:45, but it wasn't like anything was happening in the game. It just was a long game. It's just been a long game, and I don't know. I think everybody's tired.
Thursday night football, man. Thursday night football.
Tell you what, Colton, thank you so much for being here. Matt, thank you as always. Colton, why don't you tell people maybe what you're working on week to week, where they can find you, all those fun things. You're a fantastic addition here. Football guys, we're thrilled to have you. You do a great job on Sunday Morning Live, holding that seat warm and really warming them up for me to be able to come in and fill half that show. And so I appreciate what you do there, but I appreciate everything that you're doing out here right now.
Hey man, thank you so much for having me. And it truly is an honor to be your setup guy, Jeff, before we bring in the closer, right? I'm the 8th inning guy, you're the 9th inning guy. So there we go. But thank you guys so much.
Show first. So
thank you guys for having me on. I right now, produce. I work on, I'm kind of like retweaking my content strategy a little bit, but twice weekly podcasts and streams. I'll be back doing that in a couple of weeks. Like I said, just fine tuning things. But for now, I write a weekly, I guess it's kind of a column on Football Guys called Dreams and Nightmares, just kind of taking a look at all of the good and the bad that happened from that week of fantasy football. This is an infuriatingly beautiful game that we play, so I try to encapsulate all of that in that column that I write. So you can find my written work over there, and then I'm over on Twitter at FFC Dodd. So that's where you can find me, and then Sunday Morning Live as well, where I'm setting the stage for Jeff.
Take care, everybody.
All right, take care, y'all.